February 4th, 2023. I want to get into an issue that affects the Ukraine war that's probably more significant maybe than even the tank issue that was a big discussion last week. And that has to do with a new weapon that's being provided, which isn't getting a lot of play. It was discussed at the Pentagon briefing today also. And in addition, of course, to the Chinese balloon that's been flying over all of our sensitive spots in this country, which is a rather interesting development there with the balloon. I think there's a lot of, I don't have much more to say about it than already has been said. I mean, they're claiming it's an innocent balloon, and many of us tend to think maybe it's a spy balloon that has some sort of ability to either photograph or pick up sensitive communications or something. At any rate, that'll play out. But I'm going to get into this new weapon that we're sending to Ukraine in our latest aid package, which I think may be more significant, at least in the short term, than the tank issue that's been discussed, which probably won't arrive for a while anyhow. And that is basically it's a rocket-launched small diameter bomb. There's a little background on that, which I can explain. The HIMARS system has a variety of different munitions that could be launched, and I think the main one that's been used is one that has a basic high explosive warhead. It's GPS guided, so it can come down very accurately. As we've seen, that's been perhaps one of the most decisive things that's been provided. A lot of the other things I would say fall in the category of replacing old Russian-type weapons that the Ukrainians were using, for which they didn't have ammunition for anymore, and sources of ammunition were available in the former Eastern Bloc countries that are now in NATO were running low, so we started replacing them with various kinds of NATO calibered 155 millimeter guns, howitzers, and those would be, US M109 self-propelled, M777 towed type howitzers. There's a French howitzer and other weapons, I think it's German and so forth, that fire the same basic NATO standard ammunition because they've sort of standardized on US ammunition. So at any rate, that's what they've been using, and of course in these HIMARS systems. And what's been significant about them is it gives them extra range. I believe it's something like 70 kilometers or thereabouts, 80 kilometers, something in that range. And it's allowed them to, outrange Russian artillery and to hit ammo dumps, command centers, and particularly bridges, which is mainly what was responsible for the defeat of the Russians on the west side of the Dnieper River, because they were able to systematically bomb all the bridges with these systems, reducing them to simply rafting stuff across on pontoons, and eventually I think that plus just the fact that their force imbalance back around last September was not very good for the Russians, and so they engaged in a strategic withdrawal rather than face a major defeat while they awaited the mobilization of forces we've been discussing in previous videos, which are now pretty much ready to go, I guess, and maybe are going, although slowly, but they're going. But now we enter a new thing, and what this is some of the other HIMARS rockets which we had were cluster munition rockets, but in recent years, liberal thinkers at least have gone against cluster munitions, and so the Russians. This is kind of good news and bad news for the Russians. The good news is they're not going to get supplied with cluster munition rockets and have a lot of their infantry personnel ripped to pieces with those things. However, they are going to get a modified version. We've taken the rockets, removed the cluster munition warheads, and replaced them with a small diameter bomb. And I'll explain what that is. And so why that's significant is the small diameter bomb as a weapon has been introduced several years ago. It's been quite a while actually. And what it does is when you drop it off an aircraft, it leaves the weapons bay and it sprouts some wings that pop out, and it can glide a significant distance, maybe about, so what this will do is it will launch this thing in the air, and then these wings will pop out, and then it will glide. And so it increases the range allegedly to around 150 kilometers, which is quite a bit more than the basic HIMARS rocket, which gives them the ability to strike at areas in Ukraine, depending on where their forward positions are, and areas into Russia. for instance. And and so, I mean, quite a bit further than just the occasional artillery thing that's, hit border towns. So this poses, I think, an immediate, much nearer term and much more immediate issue than say some tanks that might be delivered months from now. And so, and of course, that's sort of another escalatory issue. Well, if you like these videos, please remember to give me a like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I want to get more people following me here, if possible. So yeah, and so that's where we are. Now, what this poses a bit of an escalatory option, because if the Ukrainians start using these and start barraging towns many kilometers into Russia, this is going to start, creating a lot of heat on everybody. And it's also going to push the Russians to be more aggressive, obviously. And perhaps they were ready to be that anyhow, but now time becomes much more of an essence. They would like to take ground as fast as they can in order to prevent them from launching these very deep into Russian areas, because obviously the whole issue would be to hit, again, supply bases and command centers and disrupt their operations. Now, again, I don't know how many of these are going to be provided, and of course they're all launched from the same HIMARS truck launcher system, which you've probably seen. It's a fairly soft vehicle. Right? It contains 6 tubes to launch rockets, and so they could salvo 6 of them out of a given vehicle, and then the idea then is to scoot the vehicle away real quickly so it isn't destroyed. I would think on the Russian target list, destroying these vehicles would be very high priority, obviously. So anyhow, that's what's coming up, and we'll see. I think in some ways this may, the Russians after the attack on the Kerch Bridge, there was a big kind of a escalatory move there, and the Russians then responded with this significant attack on the power and water infrastructure of Ukrainian cities. And now, of course, maybe the deterrent that they might have had if they'd have held that back has sort of been lost. Now, exactly why is Ukraine deterred from going ahead with launching these attacks, which the Pentagon spokesman said they were pretty much free to do? Well, we'll have to see how Russia deals with it, how they respond to it. It'll be very interesting, and of course scary in a lot of ways. On the other hand, a recent speech by Putin, which shows that this tank thing that went down last week is falling into the Russian propaganda line, because now we have a speech with Putin talking about that. Now we face German tanks with German crosses, moving across Ukraine territory to fight Russians, like in World War II. And then he tries to make a linkage to the Nazis, of course. And of course, obviously with the infamous Azov group, that's always been a big part of the Russian propaganda line. And it's semi-true. I mean, the Bandera is kind of a hero to a lot of the Ukrainian leadership. I'm not sure if he is to Zelensky himself, but certainly to many of the people in the military, certainly to the Azov group. So the result is that that feeds into mobilizing the Russians to stay with the war effort. And if these rockets start coming down in Russia, I suspect that that will be seen as a major escalation and probably be used a lot, that the Russians have to move forward and to defend their country now in a way that it'll reinforce that idea. And so that's in a way I guess the question is, will it be able to disrupt the coming Russian offensive or not? On the defensive side from that, I think some of the Russian air defense systems, such as the Panzer system, which is a kind of a truck with a radar, and it has both 30 millimeter autocannons that are radar directed, and it carries like 6 surface-to-air missiles with it. And presumably they've improved this to where they've been able to intercept HIMARS rockets. And I suspect that it would probably be more effective maybe at intercepting these glide bombs. That's a guess, because I'm thinking they won't be moving quite as fast as the ballistic trajectory missiles will be, since they've been gliding and presumably suffering aerodynamic drag on their way in. So I'm guessing that will be moving slower. and they might be an easier target for some of these defense systems. Again, time will tell on that. That would be one thing I could think of, would be that sort of a response. Otherwise, I think it's going to be some incoming in the rear echelon. Whether it's enough to really stop anything, I mean, a 250-pound bomb, the problem is that they're very accurate. For the Russians, that is a problem for them. But on the other hand, it also has well, it's very accurate and with GPS guidance. But the thing is, it's really only useful against targets where you really know where it's located, like a bridge or a specific ammo dump. But a moving column, isn't very effective against that, because you can't really give it precise GPS coordinates, because by the time it gets there, the thing will have moved. So that's another issue to consider. So anyhow, we'll just have to see how this develops and what sort of response the Russians will have to these kind of attacks, assuming the Ukrainians decide to press the attacks deeper inside of Russia. I mean, there are obviously various options. The scarier ones, of course, if it were to escalate to the use of some sort of a nuclear weapon, but I tend to doubt that this will lead to that. One at least hopes not. The issue that keeps coming up in this war is the degree to which these air defense systems, though, have really pushed back against the use of tactical aircraft, and putting them into, low altitude attacks and very cautious maneuvers. Because if you fly at high altitude, this is pretty precarious. But again, who knows? Maybe this will lead to Russia, launching, more missile attacks that are directly designed to inflict civilian casualties. My own opinion is that many of these instances, when you really look at the civilian casualties due to missile strikes, you'll see that they're relatively low. I mean, probably the biggest one I can think of is roughly 40 people in that apartment building recently. Usually it's a lot lower than that. And so what I would tend to think is going on there is that in reality what's happening is that most of these losses are due to various drones or missiles being shot down with anti-aircraft fire and then crashing, not on the intended target, but hitting these civilian targets more or less by happenstance. Even in some cases, maybe anti-aircraft missiles coming back down and detonating, creating losses. Because it doesn't make a lot of sense that you'd fire a $1 million cruise missile to hit a apartment building, unless there's something more to that apartment building than just people living there, like if it was actually a secret command center or something. But at any rate, we'll have to see what that turns into, and then how quickly the Russian offensive actually develops. But it would look like that the weather conditions are rapidly approaching the time for that, and the deployment of weapons of this sort would certainly motivate them to move as fast as they could, I would think. So at any rate, I'll be wrapping this one up, and we'll have to see what happens with that balloon, how it ultimately occurs with it. Of course, as always, I'll be also posting this on Rumble, my backup channel. And of course, the addresses of my social media are in the description below. So I'll close this for now.